Today I am preparing for the storm. I figured I'd turn the camera on and talk about it a little bit here. Things that I personally do for my situation in my area to prepare. In this case, literally for a snowstorm. But obviously this information is good for any kind of disaster or emergency situation where our basic, societal activities break down, right? Simple things we're used to, like having electric, having water, be able to go to the gas station, get some gas for your car, stuff like that. When that's not available, what do you do? What do you do when there's no heat in the winter? What do you do when you're stuck somewhere in the summer and it's 120 degrees? These are things that we kind of try to prepare for a little bit. Some people more than others. This is not necessarily a prepping video. This is basically common sense stuff. This is stuff that, your grandparents and great-grandparents did it and they never called themselves preppers. They just were ready for some situations, you know what I mean? So in my case, yes, there is another snowstorm coming. We just recently had a snowstorm a few days ago. There was a little over 2 feet of snow in my area, some places worse than others. But because there was a ton of wind along with that, like 50 and 60 mile an hour wind gusts, there were a ton of trees down. A lot of people lost power. There was a bunch of roads that were just, littered with trees and debris and stuff, so they were closed down. It's very tough when there's no power, you can't travel anywhere, and on top of that, there was a Verizon cell phone tower out, so people's phone service didn't work. And in today's day and age, a lot of people don't even have home phones. They rely on their cell phones. So what do you do when you're stuck somewhere, no power, no food, can't call for emergencies? 911 services in a couple counties were down. So when you hit 911, nothing happened. And you don't have the internet to find out what's going on. You can't call your friends or family to help you. It's a really bad combination of situations. Okay, so I know there are people that were stuck on the highway like for 24 hours. And literally, you can't call for service. You can't call for help. So what do you do in those situations, right? Well, you try to prepare a little bit. You don't have to be a prepper, to use some logic and some common sense. And the best thing to do is think about these things before the situation happens, not during, not after, because that's when everyone's running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Everyone's panicking. There's a huge breakdown of society. And although we had 2 feet of snow, I definitely saw some panic. The gas station's running out of gas. Massive amounts of traffic where people normally aren't, So yeah, it gets a little crazy out there. So you can do a couple things here and there just to basically hunker down at home. That's the idea. If you can just get away with sitting at home and not having to go anywhere for a little while, that's your best case scenario, at least in my area. So of course, some things throughout this video, it may apply to you, it may not. If you're in a city, it's very different than if you're in the country. In between suburbia and country, there's very limited resources where I specifically am, but it's not like out in the middle of nowhere either. So I make a list. That's the first thing I will say, is to make a list, because sometimes you'll forget stuff. So way before a situation arises, people start talking about a storm, I happen to look at the weather every day. It's part of my morning routine. I look at the news, the local news, I look at national news and the weather. What's it going to be in the next 24 hours, and then what's the week looking like? Now, of course, if I see some snow 5 days away, I'm not worried about it. I'm basically looking at the 48-hour, because that's a little bit more accurate as to what's really going to happen. So when I see that there's storm coming, in the next 2 days or whatever, I will certainly do some things to prepare for it. Because we just got hit with a big storm, I already did a couple things, like in this case, recharge batteries. You see some chargers here just as a visual for this video. But yeah, tons of batteries, obviously anything that you're going to be using, like flashlights specifically, but there's other conveniences you may want during a power outage or something. Make sure you have batteries. I have a bunch of 18650s, which most of my flashlights run off of. I have CR123s, I have simple AA's, I have AAA's, 9-volt, you name it, you should have some batteries, and rechargeable ones are just easier to get. And in the long run, it's a little bit cheaper than continuously buying, regular alkaline batteries. So yeah, I'm gonna read down this list and just talk about some stuff. So by the way, I will probably upload this late tonight because it is going to start snowing tonight. We still have like almost a full 2 feet of snow because barely any melted. The roads are okay by me right now, but it's gonna start snowing tonight before midnight, and it's gonna snow all night and all day tomorrow. We're supposed to get another foot plus amount of snow. So it's particularly bad when there's already a bunch of snow on the ground, because it's hard for the plows to even throw it anywhere. At some point you create these massive walls along the side of the roads, and where do you throw the snow? You know what I mean? It just becomes very difficult, one storm after another. So yeah. Anyway, these are, again, just some of the things that I'm personally doing and some considerations you may do in the future for your situation to make it a little bit better. So the first thing I have on the list is fill the bathtub with water. Why would you fill the bathtub with water? Well, a lot of people out there have well water. That is your source of water. If you have city water, it's a little bit different, obviously. But if you rely on water from a well, you have a pump. And more times than not, it's an electric pump. So if the power goes out, that means no pump, no water. So by filling your bathtub before a storm comes, you have, you know, a bunch of water there for different things. Now, I wouldn't recommend using it for drinking water, even if you can drink the water. That's a separate thing. You should probably, you know, buy and supply your household with some regular drinking water as a separate thing. But this is just for hygiene. You know, you can scoop a cup of water, use that to brush your teeth. You can dip a washcloth in it, give yourself a, you know, sponge bath type deal, that kind of stuff. You know, you want to wash your hair or do these different things. Keep hygienic. If you're going to lose, you know, power for 3 hours, it doesn't matter. But you never know how long it's going to stay out, right? So if you lose power for 2 weeks, you're going to start stinking. You know, you have to keep up with hygiene. It's an important thing for your health. It's not just about offending people with body odor. It becomes a health issue. And especially, of course, if you have kids, you want to keep up with the hygiene and stuff. So filling your bathtub with water it's just a very simple thing. Close the drain or plug the drain, fill it with water so you have extra water. You don't have to dip into your drinking water to do things like wash your hands and face and brush your teeth and so forth. So that's always a good idea. Doesn't cost anything. I mean, literally pennies on the dollar for water. So the next thing on here, charge flashlights and batteries. Obviously, that should be a no-brainer. That's probably the biggest thing that people think about is, okay, well, where's the flashlight? You know, so yeah, it could be overlooked though. You could think that, yeah, I got a bunch of flashlights, but who knows? Maybe those batteries are all on their way out. It just so happens that they all died at the same time and now you're SOL. So charge all your batteries you have, gather all your flashlights together. The next thing here is gather candles and lighters. Now, in my particular case, I have obviously dozens of flashlights, but I don't always rely on flashlights. One of my favorite things to do in a power outage, same with my wife, is we use a headlamp that has a, you know, rotating light on it and we face it straight up. So whatever room we go in, we could turn the light on. If like we have to walk around the house or something, you turn the light on and as you're walking, it'll fill the whole room with light and it's not in your face. It doesn't reflect back. It's just on the ceiling and reflecting down. It's a very good, simple technique to basically have light hands-free everywhere you go. All right, but we still like using candles. Now, obviously, if you have kids, pets, all that kind of thing, it's a fire hazard. You know, something to think about. Consideration is the word I was looking for. In our case, we have no problem safely lighting some candles in some different rooms to save the batteries on the flashlights. It's no big deal. So we use candles and flashlights together for a lighting source, you know, in the house. But yeah, obviously think about situations like that. If you have little kids and they might knock it over, you certainly don't want to burn your house down. If you have a cat that might bump into it or something like that, just put them in the proper locations. Don't put them anywhere where the heat above it's going to be under a cabinet or something like that. Again, try to use some common sense there, but sometimes you don't think about stuff like that. You just put it on your counter, but you don't realize all that heat is concentrated underneath a wood cabinet. And who knows, maybe that'll catch fire. That wouldn't be good. But yeah, if you can safely do so, candles are always a good idea. Bottled water and gallon water. Again, this is a no-brainer. Like flashlights, pretty much everyone realizes this. Hey, we should have water in the house. Whatever you think you need, double it. It won't go bad. In my particular case, I get tons of cases of bottled water just because I already drink it. So whatever I don't need in a storm, I'll use over the next month or two. You know what I mean? So I try to keep like 10 cases of water. That's about 300 plus bottles of water. And again, that's specifically for drinking. I also get, even though Gus is a dog, I do give him like the same water that I drink. So I don't necessarily give him faucet water or water from the tub. In an emergency, I certainly could. He's not going to die or anything, but I like to treat him a little bit better. So I consider that as well, drinking water for him. As you can hear him clicking around. Couldn't be any louder. Anyway, so yeah, water should be a no-brainer, but definitely whatever you think you need, you probably don't have enough. So I would get extra. The next thing on here, fill vehicles with fuel. All right, this is something that's often overlooked. If you have a vehicle, you have a car or multiple vehicles, you want to go to the gas station and fill them up completely before a storm. What I just saw, what I just experienced and witnessed is that a lot of people were unprepared. They lost power, whatever, you know, and during the storm, everyone was basically home because they couldn't go anywhere. But once they started cleaning the roads, everyone packed the gas stations. The gas stations were filled lines all the way out to the road, 20, 30 cars waiting for pumps. All right, not only were they all getting gas for their cars, but they were all filling up, 5-gallon gas containers for their generators and stuff. All right, so a lot of the gas stations ran out of gas. In my particular area, a lot of them were empty, closed down. That's bad news, especially when it's not easy for tankers to come and refill them up. So what do? Now you have to go somewhere you have no gas. So not only do you fill your vehicles, but also fill your gas containers. This could be for a variety of reasons. More fuel to put in your cars if the gas stations don't have gas. In my case, I have a snowblower. So I have to feed that snowblower with fuel. So I have to get extra gas for the snowblower. Obviously, anything that's extra could go in the vehicles. And in the case, if you happen to have a portable generator or something, a gas-fed generator, you want tons and tons of gas for that. I know a lot of people who bought generators, okay? They filled them up, they used them, and guess what? That was good for a couple hours. And then they ran out of gas. The gas stations were out of gas, and that was it. So you're sitting at home with no power and a generator. Kind of makes you feel a little bit dumb. It's very difficult with gasoline generators because you can't store gas long term. So then you might think of maybe a propane powered generator because then it lasts a little bit longer, but then you're talking about different expenses too. Wanting to be prepared and being, capable of buying everything you want to be prepared are two different things. I would love a home generator. I can't afford one, so it's not an option for me. Not right now anyway. If it's very, very important, it's something you may save for, put aside, but everything in life is priorities, you know what I mean? And like I said, you might love the idea of something. Yeah, as a prepper, maybe you want a bunker, but you can't afford a bunker, you know what I mean? So you make do with what you have and what you can do financially. But yeah, I know a lot of people, like I said, they went out, they bought, and of course all the stores, they were sold out of generators everywhere. They were sold out of, like, if you go to the camping section at Walmart in my area, nothing, empty shelves. Looked like the store was closing down. Everyone's buying candles and cheap flashlights and, all the camping crap, basically. So my point here is if you're going to get a portable generator, really think about, and you can look this up online. There's websites that give you all this information, but basically tells you how much fuel you're going to run through so you can prepare for that. If you have a generator and you have enough gas to go 3 hours, what's the point? Having that generator, you're going to want to be able to sustain power for a couple days. Plus also power conservation. Don't live your life like there's nothing wrong. When the power's out and using a generator, especially a gas one, you should conserve. Only have the lights on in the room you're in. If you don't need certain things on, don't have them on, stuff like that. So yeah, generators themselves, that can be a consideration if it works for you. And like I said, you have the financial capability of doing one and also keeping up with the gas. But in my particular situation, not a whole lot of gas stations by me. If they all close down and they're out of gas, you're SOL. What are you gonna do with that generator? You have no fuel for it. Just like having a flashlight with dead batteries. It doesn't help you. It's actually worse, I think. It's better to not have a flashlight than to have a flashlight with dead batteries. Because then it's like, you could have been prepared. Anyway, so next one, yeah, propane. Fill the propane tanks. In my situation, I have a 40-gallon propane tank that I use for my grill, my regular grill. I also have a spare filled 20-gallon propane tank. So any propane tanks you have that you use, most people have like a propane grill. It's a very common thing. And you can use that literally for cooking, just like you would in the summertime or something. You clear a path, you get to it. And now if you have no power in your house, you can use that to cook your dinners, prepare your foods. You can use it to boil pots of water if you need to. In this case, if you have a bunch of snow and you ran out of water, you can use that to melt down water. So propane, in addition with a grill, is a very good idea. As well as having a regular, grill. I also have a little portable camp grill. Again, just for convenience. And what was really a big deal for me, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but I decided I want to get that connection piece that it basically was just a hose with two different connectors that can connect the smaller, I don't know the word for it, but the portable grill basically was allowing that to run off of a 20-gallon tank. I'm having a loss for words here explaining what this is, but the actual connection size is smaller. So if like something happened with my larger grill, or if I want to cook different things, because I don't have a very large regular barbecue grill. So if I want to use the portable one and that, I can run the 20-gallon tank with the smaller camp grill, as opposed to having to store a bunch of those small propane bottles. So it's just a little bit more convenient. Plus, if I needed to, like I said, I can run off of any propane tank. So even if I ran out, not like in a snowstorm, but if there was a real emergency, you can go around your neighborhood and collect everyone's gas tanks. Of course, you know, if that's something you decide to do. Understand that some of your neighbors may have guns and they may very much want their own gas tanks. So I'm not going to suggest anything illegal, but you know, in a real bad situation, at least you know there's a lot of propane all around most areas. So anyway, moving on. So for the winter specifically, I have here gather blankets and clothes. I happen to run electric heat in my house. So in the wintertime, my biggest concern, if the power goes out, it's not, uh-oh, I can't watch Netflix, or uh-oh, I can't go on YouTube. My biggest concern is I won't have heat. Okay, I've been very much working on different options for heat, non-electric. I do have like a fireplace in my house, but it's not functional. It is actually set up for a propane insert, but there's no propane tanks here. Kind of a long story, but my only heat source is electric right now. So in my case, even if there was no power whatsoever for 2 weeks, I can still live totally fine in the house by bundling up as if I was outside and getting all the blankets. You know, in a very simple, like, you know, 24-hour no power situation, just having some blankets around is good. So you're not going in the dark trying to look through closets and find all these different things. Basically, in general, anything you're going to need, just gather before something happens. You know, really think about what you're going to be doing when the power goes out and get those things ready. So if the power does go out, you don't have to start searching all around the house, look in your basement, look in your attic, go through the closets in the dark, wasting resources trying to find these things. You know, you get them beforehand. So let's see. Next one on here is grocery shop for dry foods. Now, dry foods is just what I call it, but what I mean here is this is twofold. Number one, if you know there's a snowstorm coming, okay, or a really bad storm in general, don't fill your refrigerator and freezer with a bunch of fresh foods, because if the power goes out, so is your fridge, you know, so is the freezer. In the case of winter, because it's cold outside, you could store all that fresh fruit outside if you had some kind of locked container. You know, my situation, I'm in the woods, there's a ton of animals. If I put, you know, a package of ground beef out on the lawn to stay cold, it'll be gone in about 20 minutes. Okay, so I would have to, in my case, put it in my shed, lock the shed. It'll still stay cold enough to work as a refrigerator, you know, in the winter. In the summertime, it's an opposite set of problems. I don't have to worry about the heat going off because I don't have the heat on in the summertime. I'd have air conditioning. That would stink if it went off, but it's not the end of the world. My concern is now all the food in the refrigerator and the freezer would start, you know, obviously warming up and going bad. So you don't want to just do a big grocery shopping trip right before a storm. You do want to go grocery shopping, but not for fresh foods. This is where, you know, canned foods, things that are easy to prepare, things that you don't need much. Most things you just either eat straight out of a can or straight out of a box, or that you just add water to. You don't have to limit yourself, you know, to simple crappy food. You can still eat good food. Just use some common sense. You don't want to sit there and try to prepare a whole meal on a little camp stove, you know, like a big gourmet meal. Simple things. And if you can get away with just opening a can and eating at room temperature, even better. So really consider like what foods you would actually eat. Don't just, and that's the other thing too, is I know some preppers that they store up hundreds of pounds of canned food that they don't like. Why? Why are you doing that? Why are you buying 40 pounds of lima beans when you hate lima beans? Just because it's in a can and it's going to be edible in an emergency doesn't mean you're going to enjoy yourself. I would say, you know, especially in an emergency situation, that's when you're going to want some, you know, good food and things you're going to not have to struggle through. There's already going to be so many different problems. You don't want having to force down food you don't like to be one of those problems. So besides foods, in my case, power banks. I happen to own some power banks. Very convenient, specifically for cell phones, so I can keep my cell phone charged. I have an Apple iPhone, which if you guys have one too, you know that the battery does not want to stay charged. So it's very important to have those power banks for stuff, USB ports and things, so you can run some different electronics without power. If you don't have a power bank, I highly recommend one. If nothing else, just for your cell phone, you should keep it in your car. So if you're out and about somewhere and your car breaks down and uh-oh, your phone battery's about to die, you don't have to start flagging down strangers to make that call you need. You can do it yourself. All right, so that's always a good idea. And they're not very expensive. There's a ton of them out there that are very, very affordable. And actually, I don't have a representation right now because mine are charging. I've charged all my batteries, but I didn't charge the power banks for last storm. So see, no one's perfect, but I am charging them now. I have on here gather books, games, and cards. Okay, basically that just represents stuff that will entertain you and kill time in the dark. The power goes out, you're not turning on TV, you're not using the internet, right? So what do? Most people, they break a deck of cards out. If you have kids, even if you don't, doesn't matter. Board games are fun. Simpler the better. You don't want something in a bunch of tiny little pieces you're going to get lost in the dark. I mean, obviously, if you're preparing, you're going to have flashlights and candles and stuff, but it's going to be dimly lit in your house. It's not going to be like, a regular old day. So, books, that's another good thing. Just something to kill time, basically. You don't want to sit there and twiddle your thumbs. You can have good, awesome, long conversations with your spouse or your kids or play some fun games, but just kind of think about it. If all of a sudden, boom, the power's out and you're not prepared for anything, especially if you have kids, they're going to get bored and antsy and stuff. It's good to have some kind of a plan for entertainment. Because if you think about it, besides going to work, taking a crap, and sleeping, most of our day is basically us trying to entertain ourselves. What do I do while I'm not crapping, sleeping, or working, right? So without electricity, think about what's going to be fun for you to do to kill time, all right? So next on the list, lanterns and lantern fuel. I have some cheap camp lanterns, and the fuel for that is oil, or lantern oil. And that's something I always try to keep stocked up on because that's something I can use indoors. Although it puts off a little bit of fumes, it's not the worst thing in the world. In a real emergency, I can use that. It does generate a tiny bit of heat, which is good as well. But you want to have a nice ventilated area. You don't want to start getting into the habit of having different things burning in the house. It's just like in a real pinch, it's helpful for me. So I happen to stock up on that and make sure I have enough oil to use that. Position vehicles in driveway. This is something that's very overlooked. A lot of people don't do this. If you have a big hilly driveway, you don't want to get caught in a snowstorm, with your car facing the opposite direction all the way down to the bottom. So what I mean is stage your car in the driveway appropriately. So, if you got hit with a ton of snow or there's some kind of problem, you can zip out. You don't have to worry about going in reverse much. Specifically in the snow, if you had to travel a long distance up a hill in reverse in your car in the snow, that'd be way more difficult than having your car at the end of the driveway ready to go. In my particular case, I always back up my vehicles in my driveway all the time. I've always done it for years. Ever since I've had a car, I've always pulled in my driveway backwards. The idea behind that is if there's an emergency, I can jump in my car and zip out. I'm not going to back up into a tree or the house or anything like that. I always like to have a getaway. Even if I'm parking in a parking lot somewhere, I will always pull through to an open space so my car is ready to zip out. It's just something I've always done. I've always been accustomed to that. So it's a good habit to have. But, just like I said, in an emergency, it makes it a little bit easier. In the case of a snowstorm, it makes it a lot easier. All right, and then with that comes other things, like if you happen to have like a cover for your windshield to keep the ice off of it, make sure to put that on. Because I actually have one and I forgot. I had a bunch of snow on the windshield and, I realized that thing's in my trunk. I'm not doing any good. So stuff like that. If you have like de-icer for your key holes in your locks and stuff like that. I mean, just again, a lot of people have things to prepare, but they don't use them or they forget they have them, so just something to think about. Next thing on the list is get some cash. In my area, we have small banks and the ATMs are limited. There's been dozens of situations, not even in a storm, but just all, throughout the year, that the ATM is empty. There's no cash there. So the idea is to go prepare before everyone goes at the same time taking money out. All right, things like before Black Friday, the Mac was empty because everyone's taking cash out. Sometimes on a Friday before the weekend, it just so happens because there's not that much cash because they're smaller banks, they run out. So what do you do when you can't get cash? The banks are closed, maybe just because of off hours, might not even be because of the storm. It's just they're closed. You go to the Mac, take money, there's none in there. What do you do? So just prepare, take some cash. The reason it's good to have cash is I've been in situations where even after a storm's over, there's some places that are hit and miss with electric, and you go to the store and they're like, well, we can take cash, but our credit thing's down, so you can't use credit cards or debit cards. So although I prefer to use cash as much as possible in general, just because of identity theft and that kind of thing, and credit card information being leaked everywhere and skimmers, and I don't know, it makes me paranoid. So I like using cash. But in an emergency type situation or in a storm or something, you may be in that predicament where you're at the store, you want to buy something, but they can't take a credit card. So it'd be good to have a couple bucks on you. I'm not talking about going to empty your bank account out. Maybe $100, $200, whatever you feel is necessary. Small bills as well, because sometimes they won't have change. So that's something I always do before a major storm's coming, is just have some cash on hand. Doesn't have to be a crazy amount. In an emergency, if you need to barter with someone, you're not going to swipe a credit card. Random people aren't going to be able to take a credit card, but you can definitely bribe people with cash if you need something. I've had it happen where, when I was living with my family years ago, and my dad just could not get the driveway done, and some plow guy would be coming by. They'd be like, "Listen, I got $40. Can you do my driveway real quick?" And boom, it was done. So there's a lot of different situations where cash is handy. So the next thing, this one is definitely not traditional. People do not think about this when there's a storm coming, but I have it on here anyway. Contraceptive. That's right. Especially if you do not have kids, if you're just a couple and the power goes out and it goes out for a while and you're bored and you got some candles lit, you know what I'm saying? A little something might just happen. And there were a lot of kids born 9 months after a power outage, and that is the truth. So things like condoms and different contraceptive items may be a good thing to have, knowing you might be fooling around a little bit when the power's out. So might not want to have heard that, but that's the truth. It happens. It's life, right? It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, but prepare for it. That's all. Plastic utensils, plates, and garbage bags. When the power's out, specifically if you don't have water, you definitely don't want to waste water by trying to wash dishes and stuff like that. Anything that is disposable is good. Paper plates, plastic plates, whatever, bowls, spoons, forks, knives, all that stuff, and garbage bags. All right, so you can prepare your meals, eat them, and all that stuff, and just throw it in the garbage. Speaking of garbage, another thing that I do is I get rid of all the garbage in the house before a storm comes as well. Because if you have, like, let's say spoiled milk or some meat, let's say there's some chicken on a carcass that you didn't finish and you threw it out in the garbage right before a storm, then the storm comes, then you can't get garbage pickup, you can't go anywhere. Guess what? That starts to smell and your house stinks. You don't want that. So you want to get rid of any kind of garbage before a storm comes, just in case you have to hang on to new garbage for a while. You don't want the old garbage to start liquefying and stinking up the place. So just another consideration. And the last thing I have here is just a general, really anything that is needed. So the idea is to just really sit down for a minute, take 5 minutes, sit down and picture, okay, the power just went out. What am I going to need? And whatever you think you're going to need in your personal situation, just get it together before something happens. That's all. Have it accessible, know where it is, so you're not, bopping around in the dark, knocking things over, trying to find it, or you can't find it, even worse, situation. It's just a little bit of preparedness. Like I said, our grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, they did all these things. They didn't consider themselves preppers. It was just life. That's it. Things happen. We have a lot of modern conveniences that we solely rely on. People lose their mind if they can't find their cell phone. Do you know what I'm saying? So try to rely on technology and modern conveniences just a little bit less, and try to consider what life would be like without them, and just prepare a little bit. Doesn't have to be crazy, doesn't have to be expensive. Just have an idea of what you're going to do. Have a plan. That's really what this video is about, is having a plan. This is my plan. This is what I do. It doesn't mean it's going to work for you. It doesn't mean they're all great ideas. These are just things that I know will help me through a short-term disaster. And if that means, can't drive around or anything, or the power's out, that's a short-term thing. I'm not talking prepping. I'm not talking, living off the grid here. I'm saying if the power goes out for a day or two or a week or possibly 2 weeks, I'll be okay. Me, Christina, and Gus will be okay. And I'm trying to spread that word, if nothing else, for entertainment, so you can be entertained by some of these ideas. But I'm really trying to educate, and you guys, again, give me feedback. Educate me. Is there something I'm missing? Is there something that I said that may not be good? Or, I don't know at all. But I'm here to try to help, and I'm always open to the return feedback, and you helping me as well. So we can all learn, and just to say, a little bit easier through these harder times. So yeah, it's just like I said, we rely so much on our modern conveniences. What happens when you don't have power? What happens when you don't have water? When you can't go to the gas station to get some gas for your car? What do you do? What do you do in that situation? You can't just wither away and die. You got to do something, right? So it's better to do it before than during and after. Another thing, just randomly, because I have it on the table here. I might have gotten this in a battle box at one point, but this is just a wind-up radio. Again, just a very simple thing where there's no power. You can listen to the radio for a little bit, you know, or communications. Not going to get into ham radio stuff either, but in a real emergency, that stuff's good too, obviously. But just for the average person, something like that might be good. You could put on, you know, a weather channel or whatever to hear what's going on. If there's a really bad situation, they might have information as to where to go, you know, for relief. In my area, there was a couple firehouses that set up like, you know, relief areas. You can come in, you can get warm. They give you food, blankets, all that kind of stuff, like, you know, shelter zones. And it's really good to know that if you don't have a radio and you're just sitting home and the power's out and you can't call anyone, how are you gonna know where to go for something like that, you know? So having something like that is very beneficial. So there you go. Probably left some stuff out, but just a general video. I'm trying to prep some more. Like I said, most of the stuff that I talked about is already done, but from the last storm that we just had, but since a new one's coming, I'm just going through the checklist again. So that's it, guys. Just a quick note, if you see no videos from me for a couple days, just means the power went out, and it is what it is. I'll be back as soon as I can. But hopefully the power does not go out. I got my fingers crossed. I'm prepared, I'm ready, but I don't want it to happen. So I hope you guys have a wonderful, safe day, and I'll see you as soon as I can. Take care.